engines on fire. Raging denier. My heart in the gallows.
So Abigail, the first thing I'm going to ask you about is humour in the work, right? Mm-hmm. And you mightn't have expected that question, but because this is really heavy subject matter, and the whole body of work that this is the concluding show for is pretty heavy subject matter. But yet this is actually quite a funny show.
Yeah, not on purpose. It just is the way it evolved, you know. And but I do find some of the quotes like hilarious and ridiculous at the same time.
Yeah.
Even though, like, when they were said with seriousness. But you know, looking back up from that time to now, they've just become totally ridiculous. And
explain to us how the quotes work with the photographs in the show.
Well, what I've done is I've almost kind of done a Where's Wally? So the quote is in the photo, and it refers to a James Bond quote from one of his movies. I got the quotes off the internet. I had to change them slightly because even though I tried to get copyright, they refused to give me permission. So instead of saying, you know, put your clothes back on and I'll buy you an ice cream, I have said, put your clothes back on and I'll buy you a lollipop.
And so that quote goes with an image of what? It
goes, it's over there with that piece there, which has kind of got the covering open, you know, the leathers that they cover the cars with when they're working on them. And so it's sort of exposing.
So the rear of the car is kind of exposed.
Exactly,
basically.
Yeah.
And the funny thing about the humour in it is that it's really dark humour, right? And what it makes me think of, you're doing your Where's Wally, you're looking at the picture and you're thinking, this is an interesting image, and then you see the text, which is slightly hidden. So you get that sort of surprise, and then you laugh, and then you realise, it's actually not that funny, is it?
No, but isn't that the thing with humour, you know, that I suppose I'm not a humorous artist per se, you know. I don't even know if I'm a humorous person. But there's kind of things that occur to me as funny. And
I wonder, is it to do with how we use humour to brush off uncomfortable situations? You know?
And that's very much the case, isn't it?
Yeah.
Somebody puts their hand inappropriately on your knee. You know, what do? Do you bark or do you smile and sort of brush, you know?
And that's where the quotes hit home in this work, I think. You realise often we as women, and other people too, who feel uncomfortable in situations where there's a power imbalance, use humour to make the other person feel okay, when really the situation isn't okay.
Exactly, yeah.
And that's a lot of what this work pivots on, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
So this is the first time that you've been able to show the work in a physical space.
It is.
How do you think the space works with this
Well,
show?
the space is key, I think. You know, it's fabulous. As soon as I came in here, to me, it's the movie lot that hasn't yet been staged and decorated, etc., etc. So it was perfect for the Harvey Weinstein theme. And I love the grunge of it, you know. And of course, Harvey couldn't get in through any other door but these two big, huge doors, you know.
By which you mean Harvey the car?
Harvey, my car, yeah.
Tell us about Harvey the car.
Harvey is very important to the work because I originally started just taking photos in the Aston Martin factory over in Gaydon. I was really lucky to get in and had some time there. But I was concerned that I wouldn't be making a show just kind of like advertising Aston Martin cars. And it usually takes me a long time to make a piece of work. I mean, I think I probably worked on this for 2.5 years, but as a theme, justice has taken 15 years to manifest itself in terms of the all-over series of virtues. And anyway, one night I was talking to Hugh, my husband, about the work, and it was just like a bingo moment. It was suddenly I realised what I needed to do to create justice. And that was bring Harvey, who was part of the Me Too discussion, and he was now in court, being questioned about his atrocities towards women, and I reckoned that I needed to get a destroyed Aston Martin, which was Harvey, his career, his life, gone, right?
So the car stands for that.
So it stands for that, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was great. I was dancing around the kitchen when I suddenly realised what I needed to do and how I could bring it all together.
And you've talked about this show being Justice, which is the last one in a series of
Yes.
works. So where does it fit in the whole body of work?
Well, in the whole, there are 4 virtues. I started with Temperance, then Fortitude, Prudence, and now Justice.
And why has it taken 15 years to get to the end of that series, do you think?
Well, other things have arisen through making the work. You know, I might spot something else, or another idea would crop up and come in. Sometimes it just takes a long time to figure out how I'm going to actually manifest the ideas. So, yeah, and I seem to be a slow worker.
Is it just a coincidence of timing as well, though, or something becoming apt? Because what's
Well,
also interesting is that this show was ready to go last year and couldn't be shown until now.
Yeah.
And yet it's still utterly relevant and utterly apt.
I know, it's amazing, isn't it? Like, in the sense that this issue of the Me Too movement, which is was beginning to gather strength and become part of our consciousness when I started this body of work. And of course, we're still there. It's still an issue for lots of people, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, if you think of that awful interview with Prince Andrew, was what, about a year ago? And Epstein and the whole thing of his girlfriend.
Sheila and myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's ongoing, and even the Harvey story is ongoing. So.
Yeah. And the reality of what women experience in
And
their
that
everyday
doesn't
lives
change.
hasn't changed,
No.
actually. Yeah.
It hasn't, yeah.
Tell
And
us
so people would say to me, oh, but women today are highly educated and they're well able to speak up for themselves. But that is kind of forgetting that the men who are like predators are very careful who they choose and how they go about trying to mess with your head, you know.
And that actually...
And women too, of course. It can be something that men experience, you know.
For sure. And there's something interesting around the fact that the text in the work is so small and hidden, and that question of having a small voice inside you wanting to say something and flipping those things over, you know, the voice of the predator and the voice of the victim, say, and the line between silence and speaking out.
Yeah, and a lot of people, myself included, you know, I don't think there's a woman who hasn't got a Me Too story of some kind. What happens is you're so shocked that this is actually happening that you become silent, or you don't know how to raise your voice.
Tell us about sound then in this show, because the sound piece is a really important part of it, and it really comes together in the space now that you have the sound playing with the car and with the photographs on the wall. So tell us about the sound piece that goes with the show.
The sound piece came about, I think, actually, I'm trying to remember, but I think it was coming in here and this kind of cathedral space, you know, it needed the sound. And I had been writing a sort of poem myself that I thought maybe I could use. But my son, James, is an absolutely brilliant singer. He goes under Bitches with Wolves, and he writes his own music and his own songs. And I asked him, would he take this on, you know? And he did, which is brilliant. And he came up with this amazing Bond theme song, which is, the lyrics are very, very important and very poignant and very...
And the lyrics come from that poem you were writing?
Well,
right?
no, I gave him my poem, but he actually made it his own, as he had to, because he's the artist.
And where did those words come from?
His heart, yeah.
And it's meant to echo the types of things that were said by victims of sexual assault or sexual predators.
Yeah, well,
when they speak out.
It echoes the kind of broader experience, if you like, of all the people who you would have been reading about and thinking about and talking about, yeah.
Yeah. And can I ask you, seeing as this is the end of a body of work, what kind of line of progression can you see from where you began to the end? Do you think your approach has changed?
I think this piece is probably the most political in many ways. It's perhaps braver than anything in terms of making my own stand in what I want to say. If I look back over earlier work, I was more tentative, but my nervousness is around being didactic or in some way imposing on people. And and I like the fact that this can open up a discussion, that, you know, we don't all have to be on the same side, if you like. I think art should be open. And I was only talking to someone the other day about this show, and she said, oh no, I don't think so. I think the Me Too movement is totally unnecessary, blah, blah. And that was good.
Yeah.
I said, that's the point. Let's just talk about it, because it raises consciousness, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. That question of there not being just one reading on the work.
Yeah.
Yeah, and is that important to you?
Yeah, it is,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. And I think throughout your work, and going back to the previous series before this as well, it's always been a focus on women's experiences, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
it has, yeah.
Yeah. And is that from the beginning?
That's happened here as well, yeah, absolutely. Well, I think if you're making work, making art, you're really coming from your own position, your own experience of life for it to have any real resonance. And if you start sort of talking about something that you've never experienced, like, I don't know, take people who are seeking asylum, let's say, which is a very relevant topic, right? But I've never been an asylum seeker, so how could I actually address that? It wouldn't be the same anyway. It would be done from a very different perspective, you know?
Yeah. And what do you think is coming next? Do you already know what you're doing next after this? And has this work influenced what's next?
I'm absolutely uncertain. I've got a few ideas. I like the idea of working on a series, because it keeps me, I don't know, it keeps me focused and happy in the studio. I don't like sitting around twiddling my thumbs. I do a lot of sewing in my work, as you know, and I'm actually working on a piece at the moment that needs to be finished off. I'm going to Paris next year to take up a residency with the Irish College there, and I'll be working with hopefully, I'm trying to organise at the moment, work with les petits mains, the women and men who do all the haute couture detail work, all the sewing and the pleating and all that kind of finishing work that's necessary. And they're actually leaving Paris, which is terrible, in their droves at the moment. They've been bought up by the bigger houses, the bigger fashion houses, and been put into kind of factories.
Wow.
Yeah, so that, and I'm nervous about that. COVID had a huge impact on their livelihood, and so I want to try and get in before they're gone, you know.
So again, quite personal work with a bigger political question around it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
So that's actually the next thing.
Great. Thanks very much, Abigail.
Thanks a million. Thank you.
The revving.